In this video lesson, we'll discuss the corruption in the railroad companies and miracles of mechanization, different inventions that help change the lives of the Americans. Corruption lurks nearby when fabulous fortunes can materialize overnight. The fleecing administered by the railroad construction companies, such as Credit Mobiler, which we've previously discussed in the Grant administration, were but the first of the games that the railroad promoters learned to play. Methods soon became more refined. Jay Gould was the most adept at playing these games. For nearly 30 years, he boomed and busted the stocks of the Erie, the Kansas Pacific, the Union Pacific, and the Texas and Pacific in an incredible circus. One of the favorite devices of the moguls of manipulation was stock watering. Railroad stock promoters grossly inflated their claims about a given line's assets and profitability, and then sold stocks and bonds far in excess of the railroad's actual value, and that was called stock watering. Promoters' profits were often the tail that wagged the iron horse itself. Railroad managers were forced to charge huge rates and wage ruthless competitive battles in order to pay off the exaggerated financial obligations with which they were saddled. The public interest was frequently trampled underfoot. Cornelius Vanderbilt did not care about the law, and his son William H. Vanderbilt, when asked in 1883 about the discontinuance of a fast mail train, reportedly snorted, "The public be damned." While abusing the public, the railroaders blandly bought and sold people in public life. They bribed judges and legislatures, employed lobbyists, and elected their own into office. Railroad kings were for a time virtual industrial monarchs. They exercised more direct control over the lives of more people than did the President of the United States. They began to cooperate with one another to rule with the railroad dominion. The earliest form of combination was the pool, an agreement to divide the business in a given area and share the profits. Other rail barons granted secret rebates or kickbacks to powerful shippers. Often they slashed their rates on competing lines, but they more than made up for the different non-competing ones. Impoverished farmers, especially in the Midwest, began to wonder if the nation had not escaped from slavery power only to fall into the hands of money power. The American people were slow to combat economic injustice. Dedicated to free enterprise and believing competition is the soul of trade, they cherished the progress that the railroad was bringing them. The Depression of the 1870s finally goaded the farmers into protesting against being railroaded into bankruptcy. Under pressure from organized agrarian groups like the Grange, which is formally called the Patrons of Husbandry, which we discussed when we talked about the populist movement, many Midwestern legislatures tried to regulate the railroad monopoly, but there were scattered state efforts that screeched to a halt in 1886. The Supreme Court, in the famed Wabash case, decreed that individual states had no power to regulate interstate commerce, which meant that the federal government would have to do the job of regulating the railroads. President Cleveland did not look kindly on effective regulation, but Congress passed the Interstate Commerce Act in 1887, which prohibited rebates and pools and required the railroads to publish their rates openly. It forbade unfair discrimination against shippers and outlawed charging more for a short haul than for a long haul on the same line. Most important, it set up the Interstate Commerce Commission, the ICC, to administer the regulations. This did not represent a popular victory over corporate wealth. What the new legislation did do was to provide an orderly forum where competing business interests could resolve their conflicts in peaceful ways. The country could not avoid ruinous rate wars among the railroads and outraged confiscatory attacks on the lines by pitchfork-prodded state legislation. The Interstate Commerce Act tended to stabilize, not revolutionize, the system. It was the first large-scale attempt by Washington to regulate business in the interest of society at large. It heralded the arrival of a series of independent regulatory commissions in the next century, which would commit the government to the daunting task of monitoring and guiding the private economy. Post-war industrial expansion, partly a result of railroad network, rapidly began to assume mammoth proportions. By 1984, the U.S. was the largest manufacturing nation. Liquid capital was now becoming abundant. The word millionaire had not been coined until the 1840s, and in 1861 only a handful of individuals were eligible for that class. The amazing natural resources of the nation were now about to be fully exploited, including coal, oil, and iron. Massive immigration helped make unskilled labor cheap and plentiful. Steel, the keystone industry, built its strength largely on the sweat of low-priced immigrant labor from Eastern and Southern Europe, who were working 12-hour shifts every week. American ingenuity at the same time played a vital role in the Second American Industrial Revolution. Techniques of mass production, pioneered by Eli Whitney, were being perfected by the captains of industry, and there were 440,000 patents between 1860 and 1890. Such machines as the cash register, the stock ticker, the typewriter, which attracted women from the home to industry, began to facilitate business operations. Urbanization was speeded by the refrigerator car, the electric dynamo, the electric railway, which replaced animal-drawn cars where usually horses had been used. One of the most ingenious inventions was the telephone, introduced by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876. It created a gigantic communication network, and that was built on his invention. The social impact of this instrument was further revealed with an additional army of number please women when they were attracted from the stove to the switchboard. The most versatile invention of all was Thomas Alva Edison. His severe deafness enabled him to concentrate without distraction. Edison was a gifted tinkerer and a tireless worker. Wondrous devices poured out of his invention factory in his R&D labs, which were called research and development labs. The phonograph, the mimeograph, the dictaphone, and the moving picture. He is probably best known for his perfection in 1879 of the electric light bulb. The electric light turned night into day and transformed ancient human habits as well. This is a picture of Thomas Alva Edison in his lab in 1888. Edison created all of these things in his research and development lab, which was located in Menlo Park, New Jersey, just about an hour or so north of us. This was the first industrial research laboratory. We'll discuss more about the inventions of Thomas Alva Edison and the impact of the other inventions on American lives in our discussions in class.